Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm John Scott. The Army's Fort Stewart in Georgia says 5 soldiers have been shot, and the base was locked down due to the active shooter. There is no word on the condition of those soldiers who were shot. All personnel in the lockdown area at Fort Stewart are still being urged to stay inside, close and lock all windows and doors. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to announce further military action and possibly plans for Israel to fully occupy Gaza. Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas believes Israel has been wrongly accused as it carries out military action against Hamas in Gaza.
You had the lies spread by Hamas and its willing dupes and apologists and sympathizers in Europe and the United States that Israel was guilty for starving poor children in Gaza, when in reality it's Hamas that's always used food as a weapon.
Cotton interviewed on the Salem Radio Network. GOP Senator Marsha Blackburn entering the race for governor in Tennessee.
Blackburn is a Trump ally who has spent more than 2 decades in the House and Senate. Her entry into the 2026 Tennessee governor's race sets up a primary showdown with another Trump supporter, GOP Congressman John Rose. Both Republicans are vying to succeed Governor Bill Lee, who faces a term limit after 8 years in office. In an opening campaign ad, Blackburn ties herself closely to Donald Trump's agenda. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Dozens of Democratic state lawmakers in Texas scattering across the country in a last-ditch effort to prevent Republicans from adopting U.S. House maps. The Republican-controlled state House failed to reach a necessary quorum to vote on a district map both Monday and Tuesday. Stocks are higher, the Dow up 123 points, the Nasdaq adding 213. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. You work hard, you build wisely, your home has become one of your greatest assets. If you're staying put this summer, this might be the perfect time to put that equity to work. Whether it's funding a second home, helping your kids get their start, or simply creating more margin in your financial life, Mike and Brian at Fellowship Home Loans are the only ones I trust to guide you through it. They've done loans for my family. They tailor every loan to fit your goals. Fellowship is a direct lender and operates with your best interest in mind. If you're looking to access your equity through a refi or exploring a HELOC for some cash this summer for a second property, or maybe tackle those updates you've been putting off, start with people you trust, people I trust. Go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, or call 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
On the international front, foreign correspondent Charles de Ledesma is reporting a charity that Prince Harry is involved with is facing criticism from regulators.
British regulators have criticised both sides in a dispute over the future of a charity founded by Prince Harry and Prince Siso of Lesotho for allowing the issue to be played out in public and damaging the organisation's reputation. The Charity Commission for England and Wales went on to say that it found no evidence of widespread bullying or misogyny at Sentebale, which provides support for young people living with HIV in Botswana and Lesotho. The 2 princes had stepped down as Sentebale patrons, saying the relationship between the board and its chair, Sophie Chandoka, was beyond repair. Chandoka later accused Harry of orchestrating a campaign of bullying and harassment to try to force her out. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Breaking news and analysis at townhall.com. A deadly plane crash. Correspondent Mike Hempen reports.
The Federal Aviation Administration says a CSI aviation company plane left Albuquerque, New Mexico, and crashed near the airport in Cheney, about 300 miles northeast of Phoenix. 2 pilots and 2 healthcare providers died. The crew was planning to pick up a patient from the Federal Indian Health Service Hospital in Cheney. Navajo Nation says the cause of the crash hasn't been determined. The National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA are investigating. I'm Mike Hempen.
Beachgoers have been getting an unexpected shock this summer as jellyfish numbers bloom along the Delaware coast. Beach officials say they're seeing the most jellyfish activity and stings in recent memory. Lewes Beach had over 4 times as many stings in July. That's compared to the same month last year. More on these stories at townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters Media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Re-Federalist Radio, where we take a look at current events through an original intent of the Constitution lens. I am Brady, also known as War Hamster, and joining me, as usual, is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs.
Pleasure to be here.
Today is going to be, we're going to kind of do a little bit of ad-libbing. I do not have a bunch of planned stories, and Doug has no idea what I'm going to come up with, so this is going to be off the cuff, and hopefully we'll make it entertaining, as we usually do. This idea, for this radio show and this... Years ago, when Doug and I first met, we'd get on a phone call and we'd just start talking about subject after subject. We had no idea where the conversations were going. One of the things we said to each other is, we should have had that recorded. That would have been a great lesson for people to hear.
Record everything, someone once told me.
Yeah. So that's kind of what the idea behind this particular show is kind of that ad lib. Let's see what's going on in the news and take it where it goes. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, well, I'm going to pull up my first story here, and hopefully the screen will share. And let me know when it does.
It is.
Yep, we're good to go. Okay. First story I have here from Just the News, John Solomon's site. A GOP congressman presses to change the 25th Amendment after hearing Biden-related testimony. And the subheadline says, "Dazed and confused, Rep. Andy Biggs said it was very likely that Biden had no idea who was using the auto pen." Before we jump in, Doug, why do we have the 25th Amendment, and a quick version of it?
25th Amendment basically was established during the 60s. I believe it was 67 when it was ratified. And it basically was designed to to create an opportunity to remove a president if he becomes incapacitated mentally or in other ways. The basis of the idea was, what if John F. Kennedy had survived? Then what would they have done? Would they have had a president who was unable to carry out his duties but still alive? And also there was influences from the discussions about Woodrow Wilson, who had a stroke late in his presidency. And what they say, and I say they say kind of loosely here, Woodrow Wilson's wife was running the country. Now, that kind of sounds familiar. So now the question is, why wasn't that used when it came to Biden? And I would say it was because there was too many hands trying to cover up and keep it from being known. Because one thing about the 25th Amendment, and I haven't read this article, but I have a feeling this is where it's going. One thing about the 25th Amendment is it requires the vice president to be in on wanting to remove the president for not being able to carry out his duties. This is a check to be, even his ally has to be going, okay, this needs to happen. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's also interesting. It's not just the vice president. It's part of the president's cabinet.
It's the cabinet, a majority of the cabinet and the vice president, or a group put together by Congress and the vice president. But in both cases, the vice president's got to be a part of it.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. The cabinet wasn't going to do it because if Joe Biden's out, Kamala Harris is going to bring most of her own people into the cabinet. So they have every incentive. And in the meantime, with Joe apparently being a dementia patient, they're basically being able to put whatever, this is their cabinet members, whatever their agenda or the agenda of their backers wants in place using an auto pen with absolutely no oversight whatsoever.
Yeah, so as manipulative as, or manipulatable, should I say, as Biden was, when he doesn't know what he's doing, and he isn't even actually doing it, well, that's even more manipulation. What a beautiful thing for those who want to insert their control.
And before we jump in, I'll just give me a quick version of this because we'll get into it more.
Okay.
If it turns out that it can be proven that Biden didn't sign an executive order or something that requires the wet ink presidential signature, can it be voided?
That's a good question. And the jury's still out on that, so to speak. Typically, the idea is no, but it can be reversed by a future president.
except for in the case of something like a pardon, which is one of the major things on the table. But we'll get into it. All right, just to read this article, Rep. Andy Biggs of Arizona revealed Monday that there will likely be more information coming out of the AutoPen scandal involving President Joe Biden and a possible revamping of the 25th Amendment powers to a president who is mentally incapacitated. Wonder what they've gotten testimony. They've heard testimony from some of the staffers. They found out some things that have not been made public yet. House Oversight Committee is conducting an investigation into the alleged cover-up of Biden's cognitive decline and his use of an AutoPen to sign sweeping commutations and executive actions. Department of Justice records show that Biden granted more than 4,000 pardons and commutations. By contrast, Barack Obama issued slightly less than 2,000 during his 8-year tenure, and George W. Bush issued a scant 200. Wish they'd mentioned how many Trump issued. We should have that handy. I'll look it up during the commercial. I think what you're going to find, this is a quote from Biggs, you're going to find that Joe Biden was a wanderer in the White House and that there was no communication with anybody else of authority. Biggs said on the John Solomon Reports podcast, I'm talking about cabinet level officials. All this is starting to be revealed there. Any thoughts before we continue on, leading into the break?
We're good continuing on this. It's definitely sending us in the direction that we know this president was mentally compromised. This is something that we conservatives knew all along, but and the other side doesn't want to admit. But if he was indeed compromised mentally early on, 25th Amendment was created for that, and one wonders refusal to use the 25th Amendment. Could we even have a case there for negligence of duties?
Yeah, without a doubt. There's your cabinet members. They swear to uphold the Constitution. The 25th Amendment is crystal clear. They have a duty. It wasn't done.
Right.
But we'll get back to that when we get back from the break.
Have you been injured in an accident? Trust Adriana Guzman-Freilich at AGF Law, your local personal injury law firm in Reno. At AGF Law, we pride ourselves on being honest, hardworking, and ethical. Let's meet in person to understand your case and fight for your rights. Located near South Virginia and Plum, we're always ready to help. Don't navigate the aftermath of an accident alone. Call Adriana at 775-453-9595 or visit adrianalegal.com. Your recovery is our priority, and we're committed to getting you the justice you deserve.
The Delta and Bonanza saloons in Virginia City are simply elegant. Imagine ascending the grand staircase and being surrounded by the Victorian elegance and grandeur of the historic banquet rooms. Original crystal chandeliers, mahogany bars, and oak dance floors highlight the eloquently appointed spaces. A truly romantic and unique setting for your wedding, banquets, or holiday parties. Detailed ceremony and menu planning ensures your special event is a memorable occasion. With just one call to Jesse at 775-847-0789, all of your arrangements will be handled by their experienced staff with your every expectation in mind, including cakes, flowers, photography, videography, music, and party amenities. Complete ceremony and reception packages are available as well as their famous themed weddings. Since 1865, the Delta and Bonanza Saloon's guests have come from every state in the union. Now it's your turn. No event is too large or too small. Let the Delta and Bonanza Saloons plan your next incredible event. Call Jesse at 775-847-0789.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
And we are back. I am Brady, a.k.a. the War Hamster, with Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. Before we go on, I just wanted to thank all of those listening on America Matters Radio, 93.7 KPGF, AM 1060, and all of you listening on the affiliate networks and stations, especially our friends at ZakiRadio.com. When we left you, we were talking about the 25th Amendment, and we're going through an article recent one from John Solomon's Just the News. And I will jump back into it. This is Arizona Rep. Andy Biggs talking after the depositions he's heard from various Biden staffers on the auto pen. He said, what else is going to happen is you're going to find that Joe Biden didn't know who all was running the auto pen. I think you're going to find out that people were doing some things with the auto pen that they had absolutely no authority to do. Is that problematic, Doug?
Very problematic. Executive branch, executive officer, he's the guy in charge. And unfortunately, he don't get vacations to someone to fill in for him. And well, actually he does. It's called the Vice President of the United States. But for the staff to be doing these things, especially behind the scenes and nobody knows, that is a use of the government that's outside the Constitution. That's a violation of the Constitution, and it may be if some of these things did something that could be beneficial to our enemies, considered treason.
Yeah, it's one thing if Biden's just a puppet and he has no idea what's going in the bills he's signing, but he's still signing it.
Right.
That's technically legal. But what we're hearing here is that they have testimony that Biden had no idea what was being done in his name in any way, shape, or form. And also that he probably was incompetent to know, but that's a different issue. The problem is that they didn't consult him at all. It's absolutely null and void. You don't get to exercise presidential powers unless you're the president. All right, it says Biggs, who has been sitting in on the interviews with former Biden aides, said there may also be criminal culpability.
You think?
It was reported in June by Just the News that former director of the Domestic Policy Council, Neera Tanden, former assistant to the president and special advisor to the First Lady, Anthony Bernal, and former special assistant to the president and deputy director of Oval Office operations, Ashley Williams, and former assistant to the president and deputy chief of staff, Annie Tomasini, would appear for interviews to answer questions about Biden's health and usage of the auto pen while he was president. Now, this next part's interesting. Biden's former White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor, last month invoked his Fifth Amendment rights in deciding not to comply with a House subpoena to give scheduled closed-door testimony about the former president's alleged cognitive decline while he was in office. That's an interesting use of the Fifth Amendment, Doug. What say you?
Well, the Fifth Amendment is derived from the Fifth Amendment clause is derived from in the Fifth Amendment, where it says that you have a right not to self-incriminate. So the right to remain silent is about keeping yourself from incriminating yourself. You have a right not to help the other people who are trying to prove that you're guilty of something, because you're innocent until proven guilty. But if you're pleading the Fifth, it suggests then that there may be something that you might say that could point investigators or prosecution towards your guilt. Now, what's interesting about this, and this is why it's interesting, is these people were not being asked to give testimony because they were criminally convicted or they were in danger of having something brought against them. This is all about Biden, yet they still pleaded the Fifth. So either they're going to do everything they can to protect the president, or there was something criminal going on. They are guilty of it, and they didn't want to say it. Yeah, that's the thinking.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the use of pleading the Fifth Amendment, courts and juries are instructed. You cannot use that. You cannot think that is an implication of guilt. It is not. You're not saying just because you plead the Fifth does not mean you're guilty of anything. There's plenty of reasons.
Well, and that's there on purpose because that's exactly what it does on the surface. Now, that said, if someone has immunity or they've been pardoned, they don't have the ability to plead the Fifth.
Oh, you mean like Hunter Biden?
Like Hunter Biden. So to refuse to talk would be perjury because there's nothing to protect. There's no danger of self-incriminating because there's no incrimination because you've been pardoned. You have immunity. Therefore, you are required to talk. So that's the other interesting twist here.
So in response, Biggs suggested O'Connor's Fifth Amendment rights be obviated in order for him to testify. Now, I'm not sure quite how that works, and I could click through to see what he's talking about, and I might do that at the commercial. But let's go on to the 25th. Biggs said that the 25th Amendment should potentially be revamped following what he has learned from conversations with the Biden aides. Section 1 of the 25th Amendment states that if the president dies, resigns, or is moved from office due to impeachment proceedings, the vice president will take over. The Constitution provides that an amendment may be proposed either by Congress with a 2/3 majority, both in the House and the Senate, or by a constitutional convention called for by 2/3 of the state. We know all this. He said, I also think you're going to want to revamp the 25th Amendment because the way it is now, it incentivizes cabinet members to protect and hide a debilitated president, which is exactly what we just saw. And as Doug mentioned earlier, we saw it in World War I with Woodrow Wilson.
And you got to remember, the people who wrote this, they were not that politics was filled with honor, but they were thinking that people would be honorable enough to abide by it. When the Founding Fathers wrote the original 7 Articles, they definitely expected people to be honorable enough to abide by it. This type of lying and deception in government, even during the 60s when it was rampant, was not honorable, and they felt that this was just a passing phase, that people would honor these rules.
Biggs has a suggestion here. He's added that the Biden auto pen situation could also be used as a basis to have Congress weigh in on when an auto pen can be used. Let's read what he said before you give your reaction to that. I know I have thoughts. I know we're going to be told that we have a separation of powers issues, but I do think you can finesse it and get that through and say, look, there has to be some kind of communication to Congress about the parameters of how the presidency is using the auto pen, Biggs said. Otherwise, that's an abuse of separation of powers. do we really?
I know you're thinking the way I'm thinking, but of course, if you want to limit what the president can do, then it takes an amendment. However, there's no authority for an auto pen in the first place anyway. However, if that's a rule he does within his branch, then so be it. So there's all kinds of possibilities on the table. Now, that said, if ultimately this did happen, be it through Congress, through amendment, whatever, and there was limitations, it's very simple. If it's something like a letter to congratulate someone for winning a big game or something, auto pen. If it's anything official, anything has to do with law, the execution of law, foreign affairs, foreign trade, any of that, it requires original signature.
Yeah, original wet signature. I think that's fair. The thing that really bugs me is the last thing we want to do is create a check of the legislative branch over the executive branch that the founders never intended.
Right.
Of course, they never envisioned an auto pen, but.
Well, and the check by Congress over the president, there's 2 of them in place. A, impeachment, B, defunding. If they don't like something the president's doing, then they defund it. How do you defund an auto pen? So it is kind of an exception to what the founders intended.
Okay, well, that's it for that article. Do you want any closing thoughts on the 25th Amendment? Do you think it needs to be revamped? What are the other solutions for an auto pen type thing? And what is the actual criminal implications for people that were using the auto pen without permission?
I don't believe the 25th Amendment needs to be revamped. If there needs to be a new amendment that says that whenever certain situations arise, Congress may step up to investigate, and then it has to be maybe approved by, and then, whatever they come up with, that's fine. Auto pen, probably a good idea to have an amendment regarding that. As for going forward with the people who are involved, absolutely it was criminal activity, and they don't have the type of immunity that a president would have. And because and this is something I talked about with Obama regarding Russiagate, because they are still trying to cover it up, the conspiracy is ongoing.
Yeah, it becomes RICO. And with RICO, it opens up an awful lot of investigative powers.
Right. And because of that, I think that an awful lot of people could, if this was done correctly, this was done legally, and this was done without the influences of the criminals that are on the inside, there could be an awful lot of orange jumpsuits handed out.
Yeah, I agree. How's that going to be investigated? What body should be doing this? Is this going to be part of a task force or strike force that we talked about with Russiagate, or is this something that can be handled by Congress, or is it regular DOJ?
I think it should be a combination of the DOJ and the FBI, but I would stipulate that anyone who was members of either one of those agencies prior to the election of Trump, or that may be implicated, cannot be a part of it.
Yeah, I was thinking this might be a special, almost tailor-made for a special counsel, because he's got special privileges to subpoena, and you can actually get these people to speak.
And that's so hard to find someone you could trust. Trump found that out in his first term.
Yeah, that really is it. And, we've seen some of the special counsels in the past, and it's very hard to get one who is non-political or that is not subject to partisan politics and can't succumb to that pressure. You got to be a very, very strong individual to put up with the pressure, because these are always, special counsel investigations are always very politically charged. And,
and we know what the opposition is capable of when it comes to doxing, and the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah, and of course the media is very unlikely to carry anything favorably if it might hurt the establishment. So We've got that. Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting about a minute away from the break. We can wrap that one up, I think. When we come back, we're going to want to talk about, let's jump into that. There's a headline, and I'll bring it up on screen after the break, about Elon Musk and X notch a court win against California in a deep fake law. Now, the issue here is, in this day and age with computers, CGI, et cetera, it's almost impossible for us to know what is real and what isn't real. And it's become more and more difficult with artificial intelligence. And the question is, this becomes a First Amendment issue. And it's very, very tricky. And we're going to go through that when we get back from the break. Before that, I guess we got a little bit of time left. Doug, you want to give a quick blurb for anything you're doing?
DouglasVGibbs.com. I am on the radio, on video, all over the place. KMET 1490 AM on Saturdays, KCBQ and KPRZ down in San Diego, and of course, all over the country on podcast Mr. Constitution Hour by Douglas V. Gibbs.
Very good. Let's go to the break.
Sliced fresh sandwiches every day, made right before your eyes. The port of Subway could be a smoking number 5 or a classic number 8, or maybe an Italian is your number 1 fave. Whatever you crave, prepare to fall in love. Sliced fresh sandwiches, port of Subs.
The grilled chicken melt at Port of Subs will warm up your winter with savory grilled chicken and your favorite melty cheese on fresh-baked pepperoncini pepperjack bread, topped with all your favorite veggie toppings and sauces. Bundle up with savory Cool Ranch Doritos, a refreshing Sprite, and a classic chocolate chip cookie for a hearty meal that'll leave you feeling oh so satisfied. Available for a limited time at your neighborhood Port of Subs, or order at portofsubs.com or on our mobile app. Port of Subs, we're slicing up the quality you crave.
Whatever yummy number you're dreaming of, sliced fresh sandwiches, Port of Subs.
Okay, we are running a car drive right now to help veterans all across America. So if you have an old car, truck, or van, even a motorcycle or an RV sitting around, you can right now give it away and help the vets. They really need your help. And your car will help support the vets and their families. And guess what? You even get a tax donation. Plus, we'll even come and pick up your car for free. And all you've got to do is pick up your phone right now and make a free call. Now is the perfect time to do something good for the vets. Give back to the vets right now for all they've done for this country. And your old car can really help them. So call the Veterans Car Donation Program right now for free pickup of your vehicle. Help the vets and help your taxes at the same time. Call right now.
800-296-1259. 800-296-1259. 800-296-1259. That's 800-296-1259.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the...
And we are back for another segment of Re-Federalist Radio. I am Warhamster Brady. Joining me is Douglas V. Gibbs. Before we went to break, we were talking about a recent case involving Elon Musk and X. and I'm going to go ahead. It's from Politico. And just for those of you out listening, a lot of the mainstream media, Politico being among this, they have not done a very accurate job of portraying nonpartisan news over the last decade plus. That being said, it's very useful to use their articles to prove your points because a lot of times the opposition doesn't want to read something that's not from a source they trust. So we do use Politico, New York Times, Washington Post. It's especially fun when you get to go back to like 12-year-old archives when they thought they were covering something up back then and the story has changed. So don't yell at me for using Politico. Elon Musk and X notch a court win against California deepfake law. One of the strictest bans on election deepfakes was defeated by a challenge from the tech billionaire. So, here's the background. In Sacramento, a federal judge on Tuesday struck down a California law restricting AI-generated deepfake content during elections. Among the strictest such measures in the country, notching a win for Elon Musk and his X platform, which challenged the rules. But Judge John Mendez also declined to give an opinion on the free speech arguments that were central to the plaintiff's case, instead citing federal rules for online platforms for his decision. Now, it's important to note that this case is about during elections. They were concerned that, the story going around in the 2024 cycle is all these videos of Joe Biden seeming lost and incoherent were all deepfakes. And of course, we now know later that that was not true. But they were basically saying that, opponents of Biden, Republicans, conservatives, were creating fake images to lead give a false impression. This issue...
Not that the opposition would do such a thing.
No, never. Gosh, you remember how many times they falsely edited the very fine person's video so you didn't get to see the whole thing?
Exactly.
That's a mission, and it's just as dishonest. This is an issue that goes beyond elections, though, and that's why I wanted to bring this one up, because whatever elections, of course, it's probably more sensitive, and you know what California was doing when they passed this law. That being said, it's an issue that's going to affect all of us going forward, because we can't trust what our eyes see and what our ears hear anymore with modern technology. So let's get into it. Mendez also said he intended to overrule a second law which would require labels on digitally altered campaign material and ads for violating the First Amendment. The judge's decisions Tuesday deal a blow to California Governor Gavin Newsom, who signed the law last year in a rebuke to Musk, vowing to take action after the tech billionaire and then Donald Trump supporter shared a doctored video of former Vice President Kamala Harris ahead of the election. The first law would have blocked online platforms from hosting deceptive... Well, I'm going to go back there before I go on. He's talking about here labels on digitally altered campaign materials, and he's saying it violates the First Amendment. Let's assume that's correct. My suggestion on this one is the reverse of that. If you are putting out authentic, unedited material, you put a badge on your video that says this is authentic, unedited, non-CGI, whatever. Violation of that becomes a crime. That is not a First Amendment violation if we flip it. Thoughts?
Exactly right. And what comes to mind is things like warning labels and things like that, though, too. We have warning labels on cigarettes and on rated R movies, and the list goes on and on and on. And the arguments have been, is that a violation of the First Amendment? And Congress shall make no laws beginning of the First Amendment. So first of all, California's issue is not the First Amendment. It's going to be with their own state constitution, first of all. Second of all, the problem with putting labels is even if one small little part was altered, you have to put altered, and then suddenly it's assumed the whole thing is. So how do you figure out what's right and what's wrong, even if it's only partially altered for various reasons? They may say that, cutting out a part just to protect someone's identity. Well, that means it was altered. Now you got to put the altered label. Now no one's going to believe the video at all.
Yeah, it's got to be done carefully. And it's, obviously it's not something you just put a blanket stamp on, stuff like that. But in general, we've got to know what we're seeing. We already know the news is fake. And now they got the ability to fake it even more. And
the difficulty here is that we have a bunch of lawmakers, judges, and other politicos out there ideologically influenced people who just basically believe that nobody has common sense. We can't figure out anything for ourselves, and therefore it must be regulated.
Unfortunately, this is one where I actually think we do need regulation, and I hate saying it because I'm always a deregulation guy, but it's a tough question. Continuing, the first law would have blocked online platforms from hosting deceptive AI-generated content related to an election in the run-up to the vote. It came amid heightened concerns of the rapid advancement and accessibility of artificial intelligence, allowing everyday users to quickly create more realistic images and videos, and the potential political impacts. I mean, right now you can make a video having a politician say, I want to kill everybody of a certain class of people, and make it seem so lifelike. The fake news gets out there, circles the world like 10 times before the truth comes out. And that's what we're trying to get away from. But opponents of the measures like Musk also argued the restrictions could infringe upon freedom of expression. The original challenge was filed by the creator of the video, Christopher Coles, on First Amendment grounds, with X later joining the case after Musk said the measures were designed to make computer-generated parody illegal. The satirical right-wing news site, the Babylon Bee, and conservative social media site Rumble also joined in the suit. I think Musk's got a point up to a limited extent. We definitely want, some of the most entertaining things in the world are computer-generated parody.
Right.
But generally speaking, parody comes with a label. And a lot of platforms do require that.
And Babylon Bee, everybody knows it's parody and it's satire. It tells the truth through a satirical lens, but nonetheless, everybody knows it's not true. And at the top of their site, they say, it might be in small print, and some people fall for the stuff, but this is satire. This is parody.
Yeah, but the people don't know that CNN is satire and parody, which it actually is.
It's a good point. And it's also important to note, as a Christian, that biblically, and we can have this conversation another time about whether or not we're in the quote unquote end times, but biblically, particularly in the New Testament, indicates that deception will be a significant feature of the end times. Jesus himself warned followers of false prophets, false teachers who would deceive many, and signs and wonders that would be used to convince some people something is true, and they would believe it, not knowing it was a deception.
Very good. Continuing, the Harris video had depicted her describing herself as the ultimate diversity hire, which is not too different from what she's actually said over the years, when you can get through her word salad. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of Miss Harris. Mendez said that the first law penned by the Democratic State Assembly maker Mark Berman conflicted with the off-cited Section 230 of the Federal Communications Decency Act, which needs to be rewritten anyway, but that's a different conversation, which shields online platforms from liability for what third parties post on their sites. They don't have anything to do with these videos that the state is objecting to, Mendez said of sites like X that host deepfakes. It means you're just a host. You don't have content. You're not in charge of the content. We are just a provider and a platform.
Yeah, that would be like going after a Substack because of somebody's article. That they're just hosting it.
But the judge did not address the First Amendment claims made by Coles, saying that it was not necessary in order to strike down the law on Section 230 grounds.
Yeah, don't get me started on judges striking down laws. Go ahead.
I'm simply not reaching that issue, he told the plaintiff's attorneys. Staying away from the First Amendment for now. But it's something that's going to have to be brought up. This issue's not going away.
And there are going to be other lawsuits, and there are going to be those that eventually do get to the United States Supreme Court. So, yeah, this isn't over, and I'm going to guess that one of these cases worked their way up the Supreme Court relatively quickly because the opposition of people like Donald J. Trump wants to get it to that court before it gets worse for them.
Yeah, and that's why I keep coming back to my solution of making the stamp of authenticity. It's really the only way I see around this. Make it illegal to put that stamp on without having it. And it would hold the news media quite accountable. Obviously there's going to be some editing, but we're talking about fabricating something from scratch. No, that's got to be addressed.
Right.
Oh, I guess we'll listen to what Newsom's spokesperson said. Newsom spokesperson Tara Gallegos said that the governor's office was still reviewing the decision, but they remain convinced that common sense labeling requirements for deepfakes are important to maintain the integrity of our elections. Not just your elections, our news, our media, everything. And I'm agreeing that there needs to be a solution, but this one doesn't fly.
Now, once again, the opposition says we need labels on cigarettes, packs of cigarettes. So then let's put labels on this then. If they're going to play that game, then use their argument against them. So, okay, fine. If there needs to be labels for this and labels for that and labels for this, then fine.
Yeah, let's put the labels on some of the false reporting on Russiagate that we had for the last 10 years. How about we have some labels on that? I mean, really, let's flip the script on them.
Well, in a way, too, with the labels, what it does is it holds them accountable. And because as we're going through this, I can feel myself kind of adjusting and thinking deeply about this. And it really is a chance to hold them accountable. If they just report something, you don't know what the intent was. But if they say, by the way, this is genuine, and you find out it isn't, now you can hold them accountable because they put it in writing that it was authentic.
Let me just finish up the last few paragraphs of this. This is Mendez, the judge, speaking. I think the statute just fails miserably in accomplishing what it would like to do. And I agree with that. Mendez said, adding that he would write an official opinion on the law in the coming weeks, which we need to keep an eye on, folks. That's something I want to read. Laws restricting speech have to pass a strict test, including whether there are less restrictive ways of accomplishing the state's goals. Mendez questioned whether approaches that were less likely to chill free speech would be better. It's become a censorship law, and there is no way that is going to survive. I think the judge actually did a pretty decent job here, Doug.
As it was written, and I did look at the law, it is. However, it's partially right, partially wrong. There needs to be something, because the average normie out there can't tell the difference.
Okay, we'll be back momentarily with another story on constitutional issues. Until then.
Cracks in the pavement, broken roads, voices lost.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
Hi, this is Eddie Floyd. Let me tell you about my favorite non-profit public charity, Wainema Wild Horse Sanctuary, located on the Forsyth Ranch in Hallelujah Junction area. And please go to www.wainemaranch.com. That's WYNEMA ranch.com.
I'm Andrew Saul, Commissioner of Social Security. I'm here to warn you about telephone scammers pretending to be government employees. Some of these scammers may say threatening things like you will be arrested if you don't make payments or provide personal information. Do not fall for these tricks. These calls are not from us. Real Social Security employees will never threaten you for information or money. If you receive a call like this, hang up. Never give the caller your personal information, like your Social Security number or bank account, or send money in any form, cash, gift cards, wire transfers, or prepaid debit cards. Report the call to our law enforcement arm, the Office of the Inspector General, at oig.ssa.gov. Share this information with your friends and family.
Want to expand your advertising dollar? Sponsor this or any America Matters program by calling 775-827-8900 extension 2. Now back to the show.
And we are back for the final segment of today's Re-Federalist Radio. And we've been hitting up some stories in the news that have big constitutional implications. And my co-host Doug Gibbs and I are looking at them, trying to keep an eye on the original intent of the Constitution. Now, this next story, I'm just going to say it right now, and we're not going to be able to put this video up on YouTube, unfortunately. So, Doug, I'm not even going to ask you to keep your words careful, because our subject, if we can come up on screen, is a recent case from SCOTUS blog, or the question, it's an article, is, will the Supreme Court re-enter the vaccine wars? And YouTube would have stricken us right now. So, with no holds barred, let's jump in.
Well, if there are questions, and there are numerous questions coming from legitimate sources, then the issue needs to be looked at. The issue needs to be investigated if necessary, and I believe that is. The Supreme Court taking the case and looking at the evidence is not something anybody should be shooting out of their media. But it is important, because there is enough questions, whether you agree or not, whether you think someone is completely cuckoo or not over it. If there's that many questions, it has to be looked at. And if there is no, and here's the thing, and this goes with elections and other things. If it is the safest, most wonderful whatever there is, what's the problem then?
Well, except for Bobby Kennedy's government, or Bobby Kennedy's department just said they're no longer going to do mRNA vaccines because the benefit does not outweigh the risks. And they've looked at it. They've been doing in-depth studies. So there is a controversy, and it should have been allowed to be spoken about. And the fact that it wasn't is one of the most authoritarian moments in American history. And it's a big deal. And
and personally, I participated zero in all of it. And well, I mean, from, face covering to 6 feet to, getting jabbed. And what was funny is at one point, just real quick story, at one point, the face coverings were causing me, because I did try to do it once, and it made me go into vertigo. So I go to the VA, I'm in the VA system, Veterans Administration system, to find out why putting a face covering on my face sent me into vertigo. But they wouldn't let me in unless I had a face covering.
The hypocrisy is great. Yeah, I had to get a new veterinarian because they wanted me to wear, Anyway, but this case is not about whether vaccines work or not, and we're not even going to get into that. That's for someone else's podcast or show. Right. This is about the right of the government to tell us what the heck to do with our own bodies, and these cases are important. So let me jump into the article.
Yeah, I thought it was my body, my choice, right?
Well, only when it comes to that one certain issue. It's been more than 5 years since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, but legal disputes from the pandemic continue to arise, and the Supreme Court may not be done weighing in. At least 3 petitions related to COVID-19 vaccine mandates are currently awaiting the Justice's review for the 25-26 term. So we'll hear about it more next year. This is kind of a preview. Case called Doe's 123 versus Hochul centers on a New York State mandate issued in 2021, but since repealed, that required employees at hospitals and nursing homes to be vaccinated against COVID-19 if they could expose patients, residents, or other employees to the virus if infected. This despite the fact that we already knew at that point in time that the vaccine does not restrict spread in any way, shape, or form. The case that was brought by a group of unnamed workers who, for religious reasons, refused to comply with a mandate and were then terminated. According to them, their former employer's implementation of the mandate violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. We'll get back to that in a second because that's important, which requires employers to make religious accommodations unless doing so would create undue hardship to the business.
Yeah, but you have to understand, it's so serious. My participation won't work unless you participate too.
Doesn't sound like a very good cure to me.
But and here's the important part here: the religious accommodations. Whether you believe the person that's religious or not is not the point. We do have religious freedom in this country, and there needs to be options for religion, as long as it's not violating certain laws. And I say certain laws because if this was to be made law, it wouldn't, in my opinion, be a good thing. It would be a violation. For example, the Amish, for the most part, are left alone. Why? Because that is their religious decision in how they live. And if I have a religious decision where I don't want certain materials inserted into my body, that's my call. If I don't want my children, then that's my call as a parent. Now, that said, when it comes to schools, they say, well, then you can't, then if you don't get it, they can't go to school. Fortunately, there is a way around that. There are other options, and there should be other options, alternatives for people. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people that lost jobs. I knew a LA sheriff who lost his job, went to the lawsuit. The lawsuit is still ongoing at this time. He, by the way, is now hired in the state of Texas as a law enforcement officer.
Well, it's the thing that gets me is I don't think I should have to use a religious exemption for this. This is, to me, it's almost a fundamental God-given right. I don't have to put anything in my body if I don't want to. As an American, you can't force me. And you can say, okay, well, you can't frequent my business. I get that. That's private business's choice. You're going to find yourself losing a lot of customers, which restaurants did. For that.
And that attitude right there is also international law. And there is a certain trial that happened after World War II who says, hey, you can't, and is that not a violation of that?
Yeah,
and a lot of people argue that it is.
You can't have informed consent on something that they destroyed the trials for. We did not properly study it. And they say it had to be rushed. Well, all right, let's not. All right, continuing. So frustrating. I
feel like, though, right now we're verbally tippy-toeing through a minefield. But anyway, continue.
In their petition to the Supreme Court, the workers argued that the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, in holding in December 2024, that employers could refuse to accommodate their faith-based objections to vaccination, wrongly allowed a state policy to preempt Title VII. The workers are seeking money damages from their employers. I think they've got a case. Absolutely, they do.
And understand, though, this was actually done in a very deceptive way. There was actually never a law that said you had to do anything. It was pressure on local businesses, it was pressure on the culture. The culture carried it out.
Yeah, and that culture is an entire globalist mindset that respects authority. The authorities can never be wrong. We'll be talking about that more in later weeks. But
unless those were under the Donald J. Trump administration.
Yeah. Now, this also, before we finish up the article, this brings up another important topic, is a lot of this stuff was done under Emergency Powers Acts that many states have, which allows their governor to arbitrarily declare something an emergency and then give themselves power with their state constitution and the federal constitution never considered them to have.
It suggests that there are asterisks in the state and federal constitution that says, unless there's an emergency, then nothing matters. None of the Constitution matters.
If I say there's an emergency.
Yeah. And if any emergency can appear if you word it correct. I mean, just think of the governor of New Mexico regarding pew pew.
Exactly. We did that 2 years ago on the air, and my thesis. Well, you ended up agreeing with it 100%. They butchered that case in many ways. We probably have to go back and put a link in here to the chat to that one. But at the end of the day, Emergency Powers Acts are one of the most dangerous things in your state constitution, and no matter where you are, you ought to be working to get rid of that, because otherwise you have no protections.
I can count so many dictators that took power because it was an emergency situation.
That's a great point, and that's
without naming names.
Yeah, we can just talk about a certain fire in a place in Germany.
Yeah, and particular unique mustache that nobody ever wears now.
I saw a guy that had that mustache a few weeks ago, and I thought it was hilarious because you just don't see it. Kane versus City of New York also raises religious freedom concerns and comes to the Supreme Court from the Second Circuit. In this case, was brought by teachers and school administrators who were denied religious accommodations under a since repealed New York City mandate requiring public education employees to be vaccinated against COVID-19. This was Christian Scientists, Jehovah's Witnesses. We've only got a few minutes to go, so let's talk about the big picture and what we think we're going to see in these cases.
I think with the current Supreme Court, you're going to see a 6-3, maybe 5-4, but probably 6-3 decision ultimately that says government cannot make a law requiring you to be vaccinated, but that local governments may have may have jurisdiction over that and make those, and they're going to pull back. And I can't remember the name of the case off the top of my head. It goes back to the early 1900s, smallpox vaccine in Massachusetts, where I think it was Massachusetts, where the state mandated the smallpox vaccine, and John Harlan Marshall, Chief Justice, said that under emergency measures that the requirement for a vaccine is okay. Well. So Clarence Thomas in Garland v. United States, and I can't remember the year off the top of my head, I want to say 2019, said that if a ruling is egregiously unconstitutional, it must be overturned. And I think that's what we may see. With that, they'll use that argument from that smallpox case, and I think that'll be overturned, that the federal government and the state governments cannot mandate, but local jurisdictions may. I think that's what's going to happen.
It's interesting that he paraphrased John Marshall, but I don't want to. We don't have time to go.
No, it was John Harlan Marshall. That was his name.
Oh, that was John Marshall. Oh, we're talking about Marshall.
John Harlan Marshall.
You're going to the 1803 case.
He added his middle name so he wouldn't be confused with the first.
Got it. Well, very good. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you're on my Rumble channel, it is War Space Hamster. You can catch me on Twitter at war_hamster1776. Doug, tell them where they can find you and what you got coming up soon.
DouglasVGibbs.com, DouglasVGibbs.com. I'm getting ready to tour in September and October. It'll be on my site. And of course, we've got radio, we've got podcasts, we've got it all. Definitely pay me a visit. And it's always a pleasure to be with you here, Brady the War Hamster. I always enjoy spending time with you on your channel and here.
Likewise. And until next time, everybody, cheers. Be safe.
For one nation